What's going on, guys? Today I wanted to do another video about conditioning for basketball players because I did the self video before and I got a lot of questions. There's a lot of good responses, and so I wanted to elaborate more and do a little bit more talking about the spectrum of what we call energy systems. So basically, very simply, when we look at basketball, where does it fall in the spectrum? So when we look at energy systems, we have aerobic, lactic, and alactic. Very, very simply, let's just say that powerlifting, anything that is like one explosive movement, lives right in this area. And that may go with like 50-meter sprints, or even 100-meter sprints, 200-meter sprints, 400-meter sprints is going down this spectrum right here. If that makes sense? So anything that is like extremely explosive for one time would be all the way on this spectrum. Right here, that would be your marathon guys, your ultra marathon guys, your all those guys, the triathletes, all the way over there. So that's the aerobic. Now, very simply, basketball, let's say team sports, would usually fall here. Now, there's a couple of things that we need to think about when it talks about team sports, like say, for example, the duration. So basketball as opposed to soccer, as opposed to American football, those energy system requirements would be very different depending on how long it's played, the work to rest ratio. So you can already see, say basketball's work to rest ratio and the work to rest ratio for American football would be very, very different. So those are things that we need to keep in mind. But say because of the duration of a game, say basketball on average is 40 minutes, soccer is 90 minutes. Soccer would be more on this end of the spectrum. Basketball may be directly in the middle, or maybe a little bit more on the spectrum, even though they're both very aerobic based sports, believe it or not. So when we look at this, what our goal is to think, the first question is, how can we minimize or make our time most efficient so that our athletes get the biggest bang for our buck? Well, in the last video, I mentioned that we do no suicides. We do no 1760s. Everything that we do on the basketball court in terms of conditioning conditioning should be the byproduct. I might be working on transition, or I might be working on volume shooting. That is my conditioning, believe it or not, on the basketball court. I don't believe that 1760s get us to become better basketball players. Yeah, it gets you really winded, it gets kids wanting to throw up in a bucket, but does it get you to become a better basketball player? Second of all, does the 1760 mimic what you're gonna see on the basketball court? Is your soft tissue ready for a game of basketball? A game of cutting, a game of shuffling, a game of sprinting, backpedaling, crossover? No, it does not, right? So if we condition, we need to make sure that all those demands, our structural demands for basketball, are met. So hopefully that makes sense. So the first question I asked is, basketball should be taking care of the majority of conditioning that I do, rather than just running, or rather than the stuff in the weight room, okay? Then the next thing you have to think about is, how strong is my aerobic base? When you think about aerobic, a lot of people think like long distance running. They really don't understand how important the aerobic system is to all sports and to life itself. So I believe that all of our athletes need robust aerobic, a robust aerobic system. And because, very simply, just to make it very, very simple for this lecture, is that recovery. Aerobic system is imperative for recovery, even if you're in an alactic sport. And I'll tell you why. Because it's not just recovery between games, but it's recovery between timeouts, bouts. If you're an American football player, between downs, like your aerobic system is going to play a big part on how fast you can recover so you can repeat that sprint or that high intensity action, just like here, okay? So if I'm an Olympic weightlifter and I do a snatch, right, and I put it down and rest for 3 to 5 minutes, right, my aerobic base is going to allow me to either recover very well or not so well, to be able to do heavier weight or the same amount of weight. Then once I've gotten my aerobic base down, right, the majority of my work on the basketball court is going to be somewhere here. It's going to be very lactic and aerobic based. Even though there are explosive movements, these explosive movements are not is not maximal intent. So when you're lifting a weight for one rep, that's gotta be maximal intent. But even for guys who fly high and dunk, believe it or not, they're not doing it maximally. They may do it maximally for one time, but it may only be 80% of their capability, if that makes sense. Because if they did it at the maximal capability that they could, they would need more rest. Okay, I hope that makes sense. But what basketball doesn't provide is that alactic energy system, which primarily lies in the 5 to 7 second range. Okay, this can depend on individual, but the big thing is that you need about a minute off, or 10 times the work to rest ratio. And this is one of the main reasons why guys, their explosiveness and their vertical go down as the season goes on, because we very rarely tap into this part. Now, ways that you can do that is you can introduce like a sprint, like one length of the court, just sprint, and then have them do like easy ball handling drills for like 3 to 5 minutes, just so that they're keeping warm, and then we sprint again. Another great way is to work in the weight room with maximal speed. These are things that keep that explosiveness up. Now it's normal that during a season of a basketball season that the explosiveness would go down, because we're primarily working right here, right? We're primarily working right here and not really touching upon this area. So that's one of the ways that we try and maintain explosivity and keep our conditioning at peak. So in conclusion, going back to what I mentioned before, the majority of your conditioning should be done in practice and shouldn't be done it shouldn't be just aimless running. Okay, that's tired. Coaches feel like, yeah, I really got my athletes there. But it's not specific to your sport, and it's definitely not helping them when it comes to becoming the most powerful and explosive athlete. It's actually going the opposite direction. Okay, then we need a strong aerobic base. And not only am I talking about long, slow duration of stuff, I mean, that's good for maybe recovery, but you should be doing intervals of aerobic training, and that's very, very, very difficult. We use it in a circuit. I can do another video later to talk about how to build aerobic base with circuits. But then the last one is make sure that you're doing short sprints, whether it's through squat repetitions or sprints or jumps, to maintain that alactic system so that your players stay explosive year round. Guys, would love to hear your opinion on this topic, because I'm sure a lot of coaches are very passionate about this topic. I want to learn from you just like you want to learn from me, and I will see you next time.